My name is Sangeeta Sinha, and I'm here to talk about my father, Professor Brajraman Prasad Sinha, for the Colourful Heritage. My father was studying in a very prestigious university in India. It was the Patna College of Engineering in Bihar. And at that time, his brothers, his younger brother and his older brother, the late Professor Brajraman Prasad Sinha, was here they were not in Scotland, but they were down in Liverpool and Manchester studying for their degrees. And when Dad finished, because he had ranked very high, I asked him, why don't you come over and try to do a degree? Because obviously in those days, coming to Britain, to the prestigious universities here in Britain was a very good thing, and it held you in great stead. So it was really his encouragement from his brothers. It was very difficult to come because of the foreign exchange. It was very expensive, and India didn't have in those days a lot of foreign exchange reserves, and so you had to be sponsored. And luckily for him, because both his brothers were in Britain, he then applied, and he was offered a place by Professor Henry at the beginning at Liverpool University to do a postgraduate diploma in building science. And to sponsor him, my uncle, his eldest brother, Radharaman, he sponsored him, and he finally, Dad got a visa and came over to Liverpool to do his postgraduate. Now, Professor Henry then moved to Edinburgh University, and because he was so impressed with Dad and the work that Dad was doing, he offered him to come to Edinburgh to do a PhD. And so Papa then followed. I think he really enjoyed Edinburgh. It was a lovely city. He really enjoyed living here when he was doing his degree. He actually, in 1966, without finishing his degree, he went back to India because at that time his father became very unwell. But once my grandfather passed away, my father then came back with my mum because he wanted to show her Scotland and also take her around Europe as well, and to obviously finish off his PhD that he hadn't completed. And so he must have really loved it, because obviously he came back with my mum, and I think they had a really good time here while he was studying, and I think he enjoyed travelling and taking her all over Scotland. And along with his sister-in-law, his elder brother had moved also in 1964. 1963 they'd moved to Glasgow, and then they'd settled in West End of Glasgow. So they used to come and visit each other quite often, and they used to travel quite a lot, along the west coast of. My father, after he graduated, even though he had done his work in pre-stressed concrete, which was very groundbreaking and no one else had ever done it, I think he still had a hankering of going back to India. So he finally, after travelling about Britain and Europe, he decided that he would take Mum back, and I think he returned to India kind of late 1968. At this time, he then was offered a place in Edinburgh University again by Professor Henry. I think he must have liked him so much and was so impressed with him that he invited my father back to do some work and do some research. And so he came up with a research post for Dad. And at that time, when Dad was working for the Bihar government in the Public Works Department, I think he wasn't too happy getting promotions and the kind of work ethics he wasn't enjoying. And so this gave him a chance to come back and obviously his family, his brothers were here still, so I think in that respect he was quite happy to come back. So Mum, and he brought me, because at that time I was a tiny baby, and so they had left me behind, so he brought me with him, and we settled in Edinburgh. And I remember the flat was belonging to a Mr. MacDonald, typical Scottish name, and we lived in Woodburn Terrace in a rented accommodation. He was the world authority on structural masonry too. In the 20th century, various countries started to rethink the use of brick as a contemporary engineered material, and the research followed, and Edinburgh became one of the world leading centres in structural brickwork, which my dad, Braj Sinha, and Arnold Henry, the professor who he did the PhD under, and Selwyn Davis, they were the people in this area. So Dad was quite well recognized in the work that he had done. One of the most significant aspects of his career was the development of the International Council of Masonry Research for the developing countries. Braj Sinha organized a series of 8 international conferences around the world. India, Malaysia, South America and Turkey were some of these countries. He was very well known and respected throughout the world, and in one place, his student, who then became his colleague, Remo Pedrieschi, he said once that he was so impressed with Dad that they arrived in Brazil, and the television crew were there, and Dad was recognized as the Pope of structural masonry. On 2 occasions, my father used to bring this black attaché case, which inside would have 2 bottles of whiskey, which he insisted that after the conference everyone came to his room and had a swig of it. He obviously never really drank very much. We would have a couple of social drinks, but he wasn't much of a drinker, but he always had that at the end of the conferences. From becoming a lecturer at Edinburgh University, he climbed the ladder and became a senior lecturer, then a reader, and finally he did become a professor. It took a long time just before his retirement. He was very happy with his colleagues. I mean, obviously there is always politics in any department or any workplace that you have, but he was regarded well. He was quite happy with his academic friends, and he always socialized with them. He always had parties for them. But yes, in terms of his career, I would say yes, there was discrimination. How do I prove it? I can't. But in terms of looking at the people who went ahead of him and they were much younger in getting the positions that they did, I would say yes, there was discrimination. My dad was awarded the DSc, which is the highest degree. It's higher than a PhD. And I believe he is the only person of Indian origin in Scotland to have been awarded that. And I think it was a very, very proud moment for my father. And we have a photo of him, and it is just absolutely such a proud moment for all the family, everyone, whether they were living in India or in America. They were so proud of him that he had done this for the Sinha clan.